Not stressing. All right. So after hilarious technical difficulties, we've been working on this for 45 minutes trying to get it to work.
Sounds about
We
right.
uh we finally are here. All right. So I've got the world famous bird nerd Chris here with me. I'm Jay. I'm the proprietor of the Javiary. And I guess does your aviary have a name besides just bird nerd? That's
It's
what you went with?
just the bird nerd. Yeah, probably should come up with a better name for it, but it's just bird
So
nerd.
let's start with that. How'd you come up with bird nerd?
Um, my wife always called me that because I've always had birds, and she'd always just make fun of me, like you're such a bird nerd, and just kind of stuck. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna take that and run with it, and it's done well for me so far.
That's funny. Yeah, I didn't have a name, or I was thinking of doing like the Mobile where I live has like three rivers that meet here, so I thought about being like Three Rivers Aviary or something random.
I like
And
that.
then my brother, as I think a joke, I'd have to ask, not the brother that helping us with tech tonight, but my brother Rim, gave me the Javiary sign for Christmas.
Oh,
And
that's
because, my
awesome.
name, the portmanteau of my name and aviary, and he was just like, okay, like this is it, and I was like, all right, we're good enough. We'll stick with it. The Javiary it is.
I like it.
Um,
It's a good name. It sticks. I've always remembered it. Even before we touched base, I was like, oh, JV. I'm like, seen your videos on TikTok or on Instagram, so that's pretty cool.
yeah, it's funny, the whole thing, and I guess we could go ahead and get into that a little bit. I had that towards the end, but it doesn't matter. So social media and birds, right? Which is how we met. We've
Yeah.
never actually met in person, right? But now we talk all the time. What made you want to do? It's almost its own hobby, right? So you have your actual
Yeah.
bird keeping, and then you have all this extra stuff you do. What made you decide to start a YouTube?
Well, I mean, I'm not a big social media guy, which is funny. That was another thing my wife made fun of me of. She was like, "You barely even like look at Facebook, and you're going to start a YouTube channel." I think the biggest thing. So when I started getting serious into breeding some certain species of birds and whatnot, I was having a hard time finding updated information on them. We've got there's probably 20 different books out there that cover a wide range of species, but all those books are like 20 years old, except for a few newer ones that have come out these last recent years out in Europe and some other
I
countries.
see
But
something behind you.
oh no,
I
what do
see
I
a
got? Oh yeah,
Gouldian
yeah.
Finch book behind you. Yeah.
This is my bird nerd shelf. I've got like two shelves full of just bird books. So I loved them. That was like my birthday presents. My wife was like, "What do you want?" I'm like, "I want a bird book," and she'd think I'm so dumb. But um, yeah, so I had a hard time finding stuff out there. So I started going to Google and YouTube, and really just wasn't having a whole ton of success. So that was kind of my decision where I wanted to create a YouTube channel and start documenting my experiences as a bird hobbyist with some of these more difficult to breed species and things that have worked for me, things that haven't, and figured I'd try it out. And it just kind of took off, and I figured, wow, it's working. We'll keep building on the momentum, and so that's kind of when it turned into more of a social media hobby when people actually started paying attention to my videos. But I really initially started it to just get some information out there for some of these species, real time, up to date information, and not from 20-year-old books.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny, and we'll get into this in a second more in depth. But yeah, so when I started finch keeping, which was like really finch keeping, was like 2006, seven time frame, and the internet was not at all what it is today.
Right?
Which at the
Yeah.
time, like I remember when I was very young, like the internet didn't exist. Al Gore hadn't invented it yet, or whatever, right? And so. But I remember like in high school ordering stuff that now like you can go on Amazon like bing bing and it'll be here tomorrow. I would go on and order like chicken feeders and stuff because there wasn't much for finches. And I'd order it from the school library computer. I didn't have a credit card. Like I'm 16. So I got one of those like prepaid debit cards. And that was like my
Nice.
bird card. And I would order like, $40 worth of stuff, which back then would get you a lot of stuff. That's a big box, right? And then
Yeah.
it would get there in like 3 weeks, maybe, and I have
Yep.
no idea where it came from. There wouldn't even be an invoice in there. It'd just be like some dude in like Arkansas just like sending me chicken stuff and I'm using it for finches. And so, I mean, let's talk about that a little. Okay, first I'll say like, so my name's Jay. I'm 33. I'm down here in Mobile, Alabama. Married, two kids, and one on the way tomorrow. So, or tonight if my wife wakes up and tells me we're going. So, and I've got dogs and a cat besides the birds. And um, I grew up probably, it sounds kind of like you did, and I'll get you to tell me in a second, but with my first bird was actually a cockatiel. And my mom had birds growing up. She had all kinds of pets. Um, she had I forget the name of her bird, but she had a bird growing up um, that was a cockatiel also. So she always wanted another one. And in fact, when she went to college, my grandparents lived on a boat for a year, kept a bird, and
Wow.
didn't have a place to put it. So they hung it in the head, like on this sailboat. And so my grandfather to go number one had to like duck under the bird cage because that was the only place they had for it. So she
That's
got
awesome.
Chips, and he was named after that old Eric Estrada TV show, which I loved as a kid. And he would whistle that theme song, and then I used to watch the show Jag as a kid, and he would whistle
Okay.
that theme song too. So
Okay.
that was my first bird. But when I turned 16, I worked at an animal hospital that was like at the end of my neighborhood. It was a great high school job, and Vernon Woods Animal Hospital. Shout out, Dr. Empel.
There
Um,
you go.
and I was in my yard one day, and I looked over, and I don't even know what kind of bird it is. It was a robin or something. I didn't know almost anything about birds. There was a downed bird in the yard. And my mom had a rule, and I had bred growing up. I've been into every pet you can think of. So I bred like fish, done turtles, had a snake, even though they weren't allowed. I somehow wormed my way. We had a
Nice.
chipmunk, which I don't think
Oh
was
wow.
legal.
Probably
His
not.
name was Crafty because he would always get out of his cage. He would chew through like the metal like once a week. And we called him Crafty because he was so crafty at escaping. You'd be sitting there watching like Looney Tunes, and all of a sudden, zoom, they would get the chipmunk. Oh, he's out again. We'd patch that hole, and you'd be in there for another week. So we, I had mice. I mean, you name it, and hamsters, all of that. But my mom had a rule: if you had straight A's, you could have whatever you wanted. So I just
Nice.
kept straight A's. Seemed easy enough. I was valedictorian in my high school class, right? It's just like just want to keep going with my
There
hobbies.
you
So
go.
so I said to my mom, can I keep it? She's like, yeah, you got straight A's. So I've got this sick bird, and I built that night out of 1x2s and like mosquito, like screen mesh, like the soft mesh, a flight. And I didn't know anything about building flights. So it was 5 feet tall, 3 feet long, and 2 feet deep, which also, I mean, we're talking about like a robin, right?
Yeah.
Way too small. And also the everything wrong, but I didn't know. And I remember I worked on it all night, and I was using a staple gun outside at like midnight on like a Saturday night. I remember the neighbors coming outside to yell at me because I was being too loud. So the next day, I take this bird into the animal hospital, and we figure out the bird is drunk. So the
Oh.
bird ate
Oh wow.
fermented berries, which happens from time to time. One of the vets that worked there was an Auburn grad, and they have a big bird program as part of their vet school. So
Okay.
he was the
Nice.
guy, Dr. Bishop, and he was like, "Oh yeah, this is a drunk bird," So we gave it antibiotics, tried to save it. Birds are really fragile, right? It died after about 3 days. It just never recovered. Alcohol poisoning, liver damage. It died. So then I just had this empty cage in my room for like months. And I said to my mom, I had seen Gouldians at my pediatric orthodontist office years before. And I was like, I'm going to get some of those colorful birds. And my mom was like, yeah, let's wait. And then for Christmas, she gave me a bird book. and
Oh,
it was a
nice.
like a beginner's guide to finches. I still have it somewhere, and she wrote in the cover, go for it. And so I went to PetSmart probably the day after Christmas, and I bought a zebra finch named Tarzan, male, and a female society finch named Jane. And
Nice.
I was planning to breed them. I mean, I knew nothing, you know, and
That's awesome.
pre pretty quickly figured out like, okay, that's not a good idea. So then I had to get two more. And the next thing you know, I've got 60 finches in my room, right? Um, and I love that, but that's how I ended up in the hobby, and I kept that going all the way through college. And then when I was in the Navy, I took like a 7 year hiatus from bird keeping, and then when I got out of the Navy, moved in with my wife, which uh, big surprise for her. We moved in this little 600 square foot apartment, right? So it's us, two dogs, tiny apartment. I mean,
Oh
it was
man.
so small that we couldn't be in the kitchen at the same time. And
We call that
she's like, "What are we?"
a one bum kitchen.
Yeah, one bum kitchen, right? And so she goes, what are we doing Saturday?" And I said, "Oh, I'm buying a bird." And she's like, "What?" You know? And so we go to buy Bandit, my yellow budgie that I still have. So
Oh,
this is
nice.
like six years ago. He's this will be his last breeding season. I'm going to retire him. Um, and well, you know what happens, right? So you get one, and you go, oh, well, he needs a friend. So then I got Smokey, the female, and then at the local pet store where I'd go just to buy seed in Birmingham, where I lived at the time, they had this pair of zebra finches in this low cage. They were there for months. Nobody bought them. Finally said to the manager one day, "Look, give me a deal, and I'll buy these birds today." So they said, "Okay." So then I've got all while we lived in Birmingham, I've got two budgies and this pair of zebra finches, mean as heck zebra finches. And when we moved down here in March of 21, I said to my wife, and we've got that space back there. You've seen my aviary. I said,
Yeah.
I'm building a big aviary. And again, what? And so, picture we moved down here. We have one kid. She's not pregnant yet with number two, but we have like a 1 year old. And we're moving to this new house. We're moving cities, which this is where she's from. So we're coming home, but we get
Okay.
here, the truck's all unloaded, and I say, like, good luck with the boxes. Like, I've got an aviary to build. And like this is how close I cut it, Chris. Like I ordered button quail from this guy that I get quail from
Oh
in
man.
Ohio, live delivered to the new house the day we pulled up in the truck. So like I've got
You
quail
brave
like
soul.
still in the cardboard, like the shipping box. I'm like, I gotta build the aviary. They're in this box. I can't live in this box. So my poor wife. And then that was the start of the aviary, and now I'm 3 years in, up
Oh
and
man.
running. And I made the Instagram kind of as a joke to my wife, who was very embarrassed that we had a big bird cage, right, at the time. She's really come around huge. My wife is really awesome. But I made it, and like, I remember being like stoked that I got 100 followers. I was like, this is like, people care.
Yeah.
And around then is when I realized, like, I'm not the only one doing this. There are like I started talking to like you, Tony Arnold down in Australia, Bones Birds,
Yep.
a couple guys in the Netherlands, um, Rancel down in Florida. I was on his
Yep.
channel. Actually, I was on his channel last time I was at the labor and delivery floor.
Oh
Is when
nice.
I interviewed with him. It's funny. Um, and then ended up doing like I did the WikiLeaks podcast or the Wiki Listen podcast where they read Wikipedia pages
Hmm.
through a gal I met on here on Instagram. She's like, "Hey, I'm the producer of this podcast. Do you want to be on it?" I was like, "Yeah." Um,
That's
so
awesome.
it's been awesome because I've gotten to make all these friends and meet people over the world, and now like I'm sponsored by Hagen. It's like the Hagen Corp. So they got me to join AFA, which is the American Federation of Aviculture, which I got to get you to join,
Yeah.
and OPA, which is the Organization of Professional Aviculturalists. Say that 10 times fast late at night.
Yeah. Goodness.
But so those are a big like lobbying organizations. So like went down to AFA this year, and even in our hobby, most people are big bird people, right? They're citizen people, they're hookbill people. So it's cool to have like the finch
Yeah.
niche carved out. So how did you? I'm talking too much. How did you end up here?
No,
What
you're good.
why
Oh
birds? Why
man,
finches?
it's it's been quite the journey, and I guess I'll start. I'm married as well. Got 4 kids. My wife is a saint to put up. You know, we
There's
have
a theme
the
there.
yeah, we got the theme when we always say the addiction is real, especially with the birds. It's never enough, and I always want more. Can't quite ever satisfy that craving for too long, you know. So, but she's really supportive of the hobby, and I like you kind of threw a curveball at her. I didn't have birds when we met, so I guess I can start when I was a kid. My dad actually had an aviary in our backyard. He always loved birds, grew up liking birds. So we had, and he built a pretty big aviary. So we had cockatiels, parakeets, zebra finches, lovebirds, and then a few random
All
other
in one,
birds.
all in one aviary.
So he had split them into two big aviaries. So all of our zebra finches were in one, and then the cockatiels and the parakeets were in the other one. And then we kind of transitioned out of the cockatiels and the parakeets, and he did a big aviary of lovebirds, mostly peach face and blue masked lovebirds.
Because I
So
would say
it was
lovebirds, ironically, do not like they're not lovebirds, right? They don't mix with other
no,
birds well at
no,
all.
yeah, they were pretty vicious, and a few times, a couple of them. We one time had a rabbit in there, and it was just like this big, huge box aviary, and then we just divided it so there's two different flights, and one time my brother had the good idea of putting rabbits in there, and they dug holes underneath, and so our lovebirds and zebra finches went through those holes in the ground and started mixing, and it was an all-out battle. We had to separate them pretty quick, but yeah. So I
Jeez.
grew up, and then always was drawn to the birds. I always loved them. I think I just kind of naturally took over the role of caring for the birds when I got older from my dad, and I just always loved them. I've always had a passion for them. I'm a big animal guy, but for some reason, the birds have always had a soft spot in my heart. And as a kid, so my dad used to do bird talk magazines, and he did a subscription once, like I think before I was even born. I mean, I always remember him in my house, and I think I was like 12 years old, and I was looking through these bird talk magazines that he had saved up on a bookshelf, and they had a subscription card in there. And so I took it and I snuck $20 out of my mom's purse and I mailed this
Oh
off without her
no.
knowing. And so all of a sudden, Bird Talk magazine started showing up in the mail, and my mom's like, "Oh, like we're getting Bird Talk magazines again." Yeah, and I never told them that I subscribed to it or anything. I just so that was awesome. So I that was kind of how I was getting the bird information, and um, really enjoyed it. And then as I got older, close to end of high school, was really big into sports and a bunch of other stuff, and kind of got out of the birds for a little bit, and we ended up selling all the birds. And that's probably the only time in my life that I haven't had any type of bird. And we did that. I met my wife a few years after high school, and we got married. And I never told her that I loved birds, because I figured if I told her my addiction and my passion, she probably wouldn't marry me. So I held off until I knew I had her. So, and then she surprised me so we got married, and then a few months later was my birthday, and she surprised me with a pineapple green cheek conure. So she kind of sparked that addiction back, and once you get one, then it's never enough. And his name was Sonny. So, we loved him. He was like a puppy dog. We had him for about 8 years, and then he might have had an accident with a door in our house with a family member. He had this weird thing for doors, and you open them, close them, and he'd attack them. And he might have not had a good fate from that from one of our family members. But
Yeah, I lost a budgie to a ferret once.
okay, there you go. Yeah, so
Yeah,
we
that stuff just happens sometimes, and it sucks. But
yeah, so So we got him, and at the time, we actually were living in this house. So the house we're in currently was my wife's grandma's house, and when we first got married, she let us live in the basement, and so we had
Now
this
you're
this
upstairs.
yeah. So we had this conure, and we've got a pretty decent lot in the backyard, and there's this big open corner, and I was sweet talking grandma and I said, "Hey, how would you feel if I put some birds back there?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, I think that'd be great." I think she was just thinking like a few, and probably in about a couple months, I built a pretty nice aviary, and before we knew it, I probably had 50 birds back there, and I'm sure she was probably thinking, "What did I let them do?" And mostly just some zebra finches, society finches, some Goulians, things like that. But um, that kind of started it, and then we ended up moving, buying our first house, and I kind of transferred everything over there and rebuilt everything, rebuilt the shed, a new aviary, and then after a couple of years, I guess we figured that wasn't good enough, and we came back and bought grandma's house from her, and then I rebuilt everything in the backyard to what I have now, and mostly what I show on my YouTube channel. But um, yeah, it's been quite the ride. Love birds. I've always been drawn to them. I think every time I'm driving down the road, I'm looking up in the sky more than I'm looking at what's in front of me while I'm driving, and my wife's having to yell at me and get me back on track and whatnot. But it's a fun passion. I love it, and grateful for the support of my family. My kids are starting to love it too. My oldest daughter, she's always wanting to be out and feed the birds with me and take care of them. She's named half the birds, and so it's been pretty fun with that. So enjoying it.
How old's your oldest?
She's 10, so
Okay,
it's
wow.
been
Yeah,
been
so my daughter's almost four, and same thing, getting she's not as capable as yours, I'm sure, but wants to be around the birds, wants to hold Einstein, our eclectus, like crazy, like whether or not Einstein wants to be held, which is like always tough. But she would tell you the cockatiels are hers, right? Which is why they're named
Yep,
after Disney characters. But
nice.
yeah,
Yeah, we
so
got a cockatiel named Mikey. He's been in our
yeah,
family for 17 years, but we inherited him about 5 years ago, and he's been with us since. And my daughter asks me all the time, "Hey, you're not ever gonna sell Mikey, are you?" I was like, "Nope, he's stuck with the family
Mikey's
forever,
staying.
whether he
Yeah, I've
likes it or
seen
not.
Mikey.
He's Yeah, so he's a lot of
If
fun.
we
He
have
loves my daughter.
if we ever do this during the day, we got to have our birds with us. I was thinking that's the only
Yeah,
downside. For those listening, we're recording. It's 10:30 at night my time,
yeah,
9:30 at night
9:30.
Chris's
Yeah,
time. We both have kids, jobs, everything else that everybody else has, and so we're just making birds work when we can. And
yep,
honestly, it's just normally the bird fun stops for me at dark, right? That's when the birds go to bed, and it's fun to sneak in extra bird
yeah,
talk after the fact.
yeah,
And I'm sure my wife's glad I'm talking to somebody else about it instead of having to her listen to my plans for the 40th time.
yep.
But okay, so then if you had to, so like I think so 2006 to now, what are we at? We're in 2024. So that I'm at like 17, 18 years. I guess I did take that hiatus, but by then I'd already done a lot. So I'm like, and I did still during that time keep up with the hobby. So I'm almost 20 years into like adult serious finch keeping. I think you're
hmm
probably about there also.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
why? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you know, as a kid, I actually had a pretty stellar parakeet breeding program. I had some pretty cool colors with that big aviary that my dad had, and set up some pretty cool pairs. And um, my local pet store loved me because it seemed like every month I either had zebra finches, parakeets, or offhand some lovebirds to give to them, and I pretty much supplied their animals as a kid. But yeah, probably close to that 20-year mark as as a serious breeder within the finch world, and yeah.
So why finches specifically?
So my favorite bird is a Goulian finch. I don't know, it's still one of the most popular pictures out there on Google, but and I'm pretty sure I got it off of the Google or the Bird Talk magazine because they would give you like a full poster every magazine, and my whole room was just plastered with these bird posters. And they had one, and it's like the wild type. You know, you've got the red head, the yellow head, the black head, purple breast. They're three males sitting together on this branch,
I know the
and
picture. Yeah.
yeah, and so I would see that all the time as a kid, and I just loved the colors. And and I had at that time I'd never seen one in real life. They weren't that popular, especially in Utah. And I don't know, just loved the Goulians, which kind of sparked that Finch world. I would love to be a little bit more into the hookbills, but I think the hookbills come with bigger responsibility, bigger area, right? Bigger cages, louder. And, I live in a pretty close knit community. I think my neighbors would hate me if I started introducing some conures to my aviary or something like that. And so finches are really nice for a smaller setting. They're not as loud. They're still just as messy, but they have some pretty cool songs, different types of songs, and the colors. I mean, the different variety of colors just within the finch world is pretty incredible when you're looking at just like the Australian or the African species. And so that's always been a big draw for me, and also the challenge. Yeah, sometimes the finches are a little bit harder to breed, and you get harder species, and so just that challenge of being able to keep them and breed them, it has always intrigued me and drawn me to it. So, what about you, man?
Yeah,
About
yeah, I think that's it for me too. Almost nail on the head. So like I also live in a real tight thing, and I don't I think I'm good on hook bills now. I have the one up on you with the Eclectus.
Yeah, I would love that.
I really lucked into Einstein too because he's just not loud. Um, he's just not, and I've only had Einstein since November, right? And it's February now, so. Einstein is 17. His previous owners were elderly, and the husband had some medical issues. They couldn't keep him. And I'll just give them a ton of credit. I don't even know who they are. I'd love to find them. Maybe they'll see this. But they raised I mean, he's a perfect bird. He's gentle. He doesn't bite. I mean, he's a once. I mean, I didn't have a plan to get Einstein. I didn't have the money budgeted to get Einstein. I didn't have anything. I met Einstein at Rhonda's Aviary, which is one of the stores that I sell birds to. Great store. If you're in the Milton, Pensacola, Florida area, check out Rhonda's. Um, and saw him there, held him. My daughter held him. My daughter gave him a bear hug, and he didn't like attack her or freak out. I was like,
Wow.
oh crap. I was like, this is, and I'd kind of had in the back of my head, like, okay, I really do want one big pet parrot, but I, and Eclectus was on my list because they're typically not super loud and they're so
Yeah.
cool looking. Um, but I met him, and so on the way home from Rondo's, right, I'm like, I literally wrote out like on my phone a 7 point plan for like why we need to get this bird right now. And like I said, didn't have the budget for it, so literally hit up all my family members like instead of a Christmas gift, I need everybody to give me a gift certificate to Ronda's. And they were all like, well, and one of my brothers, the same brother gave me the Javiary sign, real funny. He goes, well, you can't play with him till Christmas. So, so
That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, so, um, but I don't think and at AFA and all this thing, I meet all these people. Like I met a guy that's breeding like ground hornbills. Like there's all kinds of
Wow.
crazy cool stuff, but
Yeah.
he sells them to zoos, and he's bred 18 chicks in the last 30 years, and he is like like zookeepers are calling him to be like, what do I do? Because like
Wow.
they don't breed,
Yeah.
So I think and I think he told me they reach breeding maturity at like 9. It's like this huge long thing. Yeah. So
Holy
like,
cow.
but I don't think like if you told me tomorrow, like everything else excluded, like I lived out in a farm by myself, I had unlimited money and everything, I still don't think that I would just get more finches. I don't think I would
Yeah.
want to breed like macaws. I love finches. I love, like you said, the challenge of getting them to breed. And Zeb Ernest, who's Blue Planet Pets on Instagram, and he's a huge following on TikTok. He and I were talking about it. He's a big hookbill guy, and he said like finches are the aquarium of the bird world. And so I think he's right there. finches don't need you at all, right?
Right.
Beyond like you can, and I travel for work sometimes. Sometimes my wife's got to do it. The ability for you to kind of set finches up and let them go makes them, they're an extremely convenient pet. Even they're easier than a
Absolutely.
dog or cat.
Absolutely.
Um, and I love, I love having Einstein. I love having that human bird interaction. You get it with Mikey, but
Yeah.
I think I prefer bird to bird interaction. Like I remember in high school, I had that cage in my room. I could lay like on a Saturday morning if I didn't have work or whatever, I could wake up and instead of going downstairs, I could just lay in my bed and watch the birds build a nest for an hour. And
Yep.
like that is so cool. Like the people that get to see that are like Jay in his bed in Atlanta, and then like dudes in the outback of Australia watching a zebra finch. Like that was it.
Right.
So there's something special about that for me
Yeah.
that, and how maneuverable they are. Every finches, the wide variety. Oh, and the ability to keep, like we talked about lovebirds earlier. You can keep a lot of different species
Yeah.
together pretty well. There's some species like my weavers, they don't play well with others, but
Yeah.
as a general rule, like we both have big community aviaries with a lot of birds that are from different continents and they can
Yeah.
still do it. So that having that is pretty special to
Yeah.
me.
I think I've probably got, I'm off the top of my head, probably 13 different species together right now that, you know, live
I'd have to do the
harmoniously,
math.
and it's awesome.
I'd have to do the math, but yeah, I'm about there in my big aviary. It's between 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there, and then a few others spread out.
Yeah.
But yeah, to see all that and to see like flocking behavior, like all
Oh
my
yeah.
society finches will stay together and like bing around, and like to see that, or like my orange cheeked waxbills. And then like I
Hmm.
filmed it today. I'm going to post it on Instagram soon. One of my female red-billed firefinches, she has like a wing cyst. I think I sent you the picture. She had like cancer
Yeah.
or something.
Uh-huh.
And so she's molting right now, and the combination of those two things, she's flightless right now. So she's getting around good on her feet, but she can't fly.
Yeah.
And her mate comes and just stays with her. He just flies to her and hangs
Yep.
out with her. I'm like, where would you see that? Even with,
Yeah.
you just don't get it with anything but finches.
Right.
So that kind of leads us into, so what are your favorite species? So I know Gouldians, and they're one of mine too, and I'll tell you
Yeah.
why in a second. But what are the other ones that you're like, man, I wouldn't have an aviary without these birds?
And I think I've got a few different favorite birds for different reasons. Goulians are my number one. I think just as that they were my childhood passion. Like as a kid, I was like, that's the bird I'm gonna strive to own one day. And when I bought my first pair of Goulians, and I didn't get it until after I was married. Like I felt like I was the champion on the world. Like, yeah, I got it. And I'm pretty sure my female died like a week later, and I was like, oh, this sucks. I just dropped several $100s on this bird and it died. I was like
Yeah,
so
I know
bummed,
that.
but yeah, so definitely that. I've come to really enjoy the Canaries, really for both colors and their song. They're, a little bit bigger than your finch, but I do have them mixed in with my finches.
Same,
Um,
yeah.
I would probably say majority, if not all, of the Australian finches. If I could get my hands on them, I would. If I had a 20-acre plot of land and I could just build this ginormous aviary, I would probably just take all of Australia and just put it inside of that. They've got some beautiful birds that I love, but um, some of the
You
African
got to get
species that are,
we got to
say
get you
that
some
again.
diamond doves too. Diamond
I know,
doves for
man.
Australian.
I
They're
know. Yeah,
coming. They're in my
I was
holding right now, waiting on
gonna
you.
say hold on to those and send them my way. And
Yeah.
I don't know why I've never gotten any. Everybody that I've talked to says they've loved them and they've been such a cool addition to their aviary. And I don't know why. I just have never gotten them, but I'm excited for those ones. I think they'd be really fun to
Yeah, they're
add
coming.
and put out in the big outdoor aviary that I have. But I'd probably say the other finch that outside of the Gouldian that I've never owned before that I want to. There's two of them. One is the purple, and I'm gonna say its name wrong, Granada or Grenadier finch.
Grenadier. Grenadier.
Grenadier. There you go. From Africa. I think those are beautiful birds. I know they're incredibly difficult to get them to raise chicks, but and that's probably why I've never seen one in person, just because
I've
they're
got
that
something
rare.
for you. When we're done recording, remind me. I
Okay,
got something to talk to you about.
sounds good. And then the other one would be the red crimson finch from Australia. I've never seen one of those before, and I know those ones. From what I hear, they're a little bit more of an aggressive species, so I probably wouldn't be able to keep them with my other birds. But those are some beautiful looking birds. They got some
Did
stunning
you
red
see
on them.
Tony Arnold's post the other day about them on Instagram?
Uh-uh.
So
No.
he has them in his aviary, right, in Australia,
Oh
and
man.
they had a cyclone, like a hurricane, they call it a cyclone,
Hmm.
come through, and it blew there was a wild crimson finch on the outside of his aviary, and his males they were fighting through the wall,
Yeah.
a wild one in
That-
his, and he doesn't keep zebra finches, same thing, and I asked him like, why don't you? And he literally goes, mate, they're in my backyard, you know. I was like,
Man,
oh yeah,
I wish I could have that. It's crazy to see. Yeah, I love his channel. I love looking at his birds. He's got an incredible selection and variety of birds, and the
yeah.
care that he provides and the aviaries that he has is just out of this world.
I
That's
told
something that I strive to have.
Well, I told him the other day, I was like, Tony, you're one of the best finch keepers in the world. And he's like, I don't know about that, mate, but cheers. And I'm like, I've, like, Tony, I've looked around a lot, buddy.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm pretty sure
yeah,
whether you are or
yeah.
not, I am. Um,
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges we have here in Utah, we get some really cold winters. I mean, it's snowing outside tonight right now, and so to have something like what Tony has, would the most of the birds would die. You have to have the
yeah,
inside component and the heating component, which does put a strain and added money, I guess, to put into the bird hobby to keep them warm and whatnot in our um, climate that we have here, which does throw a little bit of
yeah.
a kink
And
in the bird keeping. But
I'm not as cold as you by any means, and I definitely am average, much warmer. But I mean, we got down below freezing for a couple days this year, and everyone saw on Instagram I had to haul all my birds in, and even now
yeah,
I've got the aviary, the outside and the inside. The heaters are there and they're on thermostats, but I'm sure they're both running right now, and that isn't cheap,
right.
you know. And my CPA wife will tell you it's not cheap. Um, but yeah. Okay, so favorite birds for me. So Gouldians, speaking of my wife, so Gouldians are one of my favorites too, is also one of the main birds that drew me to finches. Again, same story as you, couldn't afford them. I think I got
Yeah.
my first one in college, and I remember I paid $50 for it.
Oh wow, that's a
At,
steal.
right, which I'm lucky. So unlike you, I grew up in Georgia, and then now I live in Alabama, so I'm close to Florida,
Yeah,
which kind of the bird hotspots in the United States are Florida, a little bit New York City, and then California. So
California.
California
Yep.
is your closest one.
Yep.
Um, Florida would be my big hotspot. So I was at they have those traveling bird shows. So I went to the one in Atlanta and I bought a male Gouldian redhead purple breast for $50. But
Nice.
like that was like, okay, I'm gonna have ramen for a week, but like this Gouldian, right?
Yeah.
And because like growing up in high school, like the reason I kept zebras in societies, I think the most expensive finch I had before I got that Gouldian was either like a spice finch that was like $30,
Yeah.
or I did have a pin-tailed Wida pair that I
Nice.
bought from this guy that I now know he was selling them because that bird, you want to talk about aggressive birds, that bird is, wanted for murder.
Wow.
And not going back to jail. That's how aggressive that bird is. But he sold me a pair, and I think I paid $50 for the pair. Um, and so that's before I had that Gouldian. Gouldians are my favorite, and the reason, one of the reasons they're my favorite. So John Gould, who it's the Lady Gouldian finch. So
Hmm.
he he lived in England. He's friends with Charles Darwin, and he was by trade a taxidermist, um, which is kind of wild because like I'm pretty sure now like you can't be a professional taxidermist anymore. I guess maybe a few people, but at the time, and he also wrote like he was an early ornithologist, so he named a lot of
Hmm.
bird species. And his wife was an artist, and she did all the drawings. So like those old natural
Nice.
history books. So that was their deal. So they had five kids, and they left their kids with like her parents and went to Australia, which took like 2 years. Right? They took like a
Dang.
sailboat, and they're like, "Bye, kids. We'll see you in 2 years." And they go down there. She has the sixth kid on the way.
Wow.
And so they go down there, they discover all these species, and they finally come back to England, 2 year journey. And while they're working on it, she passed away, which was like, she was young, but that's how it rolls back then. So he named the Gouldian finch the Lady Gouldian finch after his wife, because he's like, she's the prettiest girl I've ever seen.
That's
This is the
awesome.
prettiest bird I've ever seen. Boom. So it always makes me think of my wife. And I'm like you. I love the Australians. The really specifically the Pophelia genus. So that shaft tails, which is my wife's favorite.
Nice.
Mask grass finches, which is maybe my favorite. I love the
Okay.
masks. And then the Parsons, which not always is well behaved. And you have the Parsons that I ended up with by accident. You have Traveler
Yep.
over there.
Yep.
So he went from Belgium to
Oh man.
California, California to Florida, Florida to Alabama, and Alabama to Utah.
And still
So,
sings up a
um,
storm. Still as happy as
yeah,
can be.
I told a buddy of mine about that, and he goes, "Man, he must be tired from all that flying." Um, so, um, that genus, for whatever reason, I just think they're so pretty and so
I
cool. And even though they're really closely related, they're really different. The
Yeah.
shaft tails do that head bobbing thing. The masks
Uh-huh.
look so different from any other bird. They almost look like they're just all beak.
Yeah.
Um, and then
You,
as far as Africans, like the red-billed firefinches, for me, I just
they're
love them.
beautiful, stunning birds.
Yeah, I
And
love
super
them.
gentle and passive.
Right? Yeah, they're not aggressive at all, and I think they must have the strongest pair bond of any, besides maybe the
Yeah.
diamond doves. The diamond
Yeah.
doves, wait till you see the diamond doves. Like they, the diamond doves are the only birds that I see like routinely incubate the eggs together. Like
Okay.
during the day, they'll just both sit in there on their eggs, like, man, we're
Nice.
just hanging out. So, so that's pretty cool. All right. So,
And real quick, one thing I love about the
yeah,
shaft tails and the Parsons finches, and I haven't owned mass finches, but my brother has some, and so I've been able to observe them in his aviary.
we're working on
You
that
know,
too.
yeah, we're working on that. We'll get something going there, but they're goofy birds. They've got some pretty funny personalities. They're super energetic, and they're incredibly intelligent. Like when I, before I built my outdoor aviary that I have now, I had them inside a shed and, tried to give them as much space as I wanted to. But it's like as soon as I gave them more freedom and more area, man, their personalities just completely blossomed, like their head bobs and things like that. They really are a goofy bird, but really fun to watch and entertaining just because they have so much energy. And I think lots of times people pass on them because they're not the colors of the Gouldian, right? They're different shades of gray and black. But man, I actually really do love my Shaftel finches and the Parson finches. They're one of the highlights and super active and energetic and really draw people's attention when they just sit there and watch my birds. So they're pretty
They
cool. I
they
like
seem
those.
to me always like they're having like a discussion.
Oh yeah,
Like they
uh-huh.
seem
Yeah,
like
and
they're
they're
like
like
almost in
looking
like a
at each
football
other,
huddle.
bobbing their heads up and down, and
Yeah.
yeah, like legit having a conversation of man, that zebra finch over there is a
Yeah.
crap, It's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you see how they built that nest?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. That's right. My wife says she thinks they're really pretty. She says she thinks they look like they're painted. She said they don't look
Uh-huh.
real. And
I
I
think
see that.
the Shaftel finches and the Java finches, they have such a sleek feather type, like it really does look like it's painted on. It is beautiful, and you get the sun shining on them, and they glow. They're beautiful birds.
Yeah, I love them. They're a lot of fun. So my first shaft tail I ever got was given to me for free. I got a pair. I bought the female, and the guy said, "Hey, I got this male. Give him to you for free." He had a metal leg band, and it broke his leg off. So he had like a stump. He had just
Hmm.
like the knee up on one side, and he would land, and the way he would perch, he'd grab on with one leg and stick his wing out. So he had like a
Yeah,
little raw spot, and he goes, yeah, you can try and keep him, or you can, just toss him. And I was like, and I've gotten several birds that way where somebody else was like, I'm just going to throw this bird out the window. I was like, no, give it to me.
yeah.
But he was great. He was a cool bird. It was cool. He was tough. He lived the full lifespan minus a leg. Right? They're
That's
awesome
awesome.
birds. Yeah.
Yeah, they're good.
And all right. So then the next question is least favorite. Right. You like, so, and I don't mean that you don't like them because obviously if you have them, you like them. But what's the bird in your aviary that if somebody was like, hey, you can't keep these anymore, you'd be like, that's fine.
Yeah. And just strictly sticking to the finch world, which is funny because I have a bunch of them. I would probably say the zebra finches.
Oh,
Um,
really?
um, I have a love-hate relationship, and I think I posted a video of this several years ago of the good and the bad of the zebra finch. I love some of the new color mutations that have come out these last several years that's really kind of re-sparked my interest on the zebra finches. Um, but they can be a bully when it comes to they're probably the most aggressive finch that I have in my community aviaries. And there's some of the more passive finches, like your Gouldian finches, probably your fire finches, things like that. You couldn't ever breed them with the zebra finches together because they would just take over their nests. They're not aggressive to like pluck out feathers, things like that, but they're a bully. So I would probably say that's one of the things that I least like. Probably one of the species. I'm trying to think, but I still like them enough to have them because I have a bunch of them right now. So, and, I'm eating my own words here, but
Right. I'm
man,
about to say the same
I,
thing about a different
I,
different
I,
species.
I don't know. I honestly, overall, in the finch world, um, there's probably not very many finches that I don't like or birds that I don't like. But I do tend, I've set up my aviary to more of a passive community aviary with multiple species. So, I would have to keep it that way and wouldn't be able to introduce any of the more aggressive finches like the crimson finch or, you know, different types of zebra finches, things like that. It makes it difficult, and so I probably wouldn't be able to bring those birds in. But yeah,
Yeah. So I see. I love zebras. I can't. I don't think I could have an aviary without them. But I also get. I had one. I remember the first time I really found out how mean they were. I got a new pair. I had a male Tarzan, right? So I had him forever, and I actually at one point had him going with two females. So he had his main gal, and then he had a side chick, and I'm just pumping out babies. So I was like, oh, I'll just get another male. Well, I mean, I put him in, and straight to fighting to the point where this other bird had Tarzan by the wing and threw him.
oh
And I
wow,
was like, okay, you're gone. And so that's kind of where I have a rule. I try to go on a bird by bird basis because even, I try to explain to people all these things are like generalities, right? So,
yeah,
like we talked about Einstein being a quiet eclectus, there are loud eclectuses, right? There
right,
are shaft tails often get a reputation as being pushy. I haven't had a pushy shaft tail, but they must exist because people talk about that
yeah,
they are.
yeah,
So so I think I have a rule basically that I'll try anything on the like maybe list.
right,
Like I know there's never going to be a red-billed firefinch that's going to cause me a problem. Some zebra finches might cause me a problem. I have a rule like if I'm in the aviary, I put a new bird in and I see you start to cause problems, like you're out. Like I
yeah,
vote you off
right,
the island. And so I have found specific mutations of zebra finches tend to be better community birds. So I
yeah,
bred fire finches this year with zebras in there, but I have almost all white mutation or like the orange breast zebras. And I find that because what people don't realize is when you breed for color, you get other things too. So
Right.
like the traits are not all just color. You get different personality, you get different size, head shape, all kinds of stuff come with that
Yeah.
territory. And I found that like the chestnut flanked white, the all white, the non wild type zebras tend to also be less wild.
Yep.
So as a
For
general
sure.
rule, I try to avoid the wild type zebras, and it does better.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I would
you
agree.
know, so for me, it's canaries. Um, I I really hadn't kept canaries in a long time before this past year. Um, I ended up getting a one-eyed hen, and it's like, well, I gotta get a male if I got this hen that somebody gave me, right? You know how it goes. Now I'm
Yep.
up to right now I have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven canaries, and I sold more this year. Um, I they're beautiful. They're different than the finches. They breed differently than the finches. They breed a different
Yep.
time. The
Yep.
song thing is awesome, but they do tend to be a little bit pushier. They're bigger. They're for me the canary value to annoying is like just barely like they just barely tip the scales to where like all right I
Yep.
should have canaries
Yeah. I can see
and I've
that.
got them but they yeah if tomorrow you're like hey Jay give me all your canaries and I'll give you five more shaft tails I'd probably take you up on that like I
Yeah.
don't think I'd miss them a ton if they were gone.
Yeah.
um
No, I hear you. Hey, I got my baby's crying, so we might have
all
to
right you want
wrap it
to
up
you want
for
to
tonight. But
call it for tonight
yes, if my
or
wife was home, I'd say no. But since he's
all
probably
right.
not going to go back to sleep anytime soon, I'll probably have to say.
Okay. All right. Well,
I don't know if you have any
we'll
closing
call it for
remarks or
tonight.
something we want to do, or
No, I've got a bunch more, but we'll save it for next time.
yeah,
So
let's do it.
I think
Honestly, I think we should just keep doing it, even if no one else
yeah.
watches them but us. I'll do it, man.
Well, and maybe we need to what we'll figure out how to post these on both of our channels or alternate or something. But what we also
Right?
need to do if we're going to keep doing this is we need a name for it. So maybe
Yeah.
we'll let you got I've got the bigger Instagram comment section. You've got the bigger YouTube comment
YouTube.
section.
Yeah,
So maybe we'll like both put it out there and see if we can crowdsource a name
dude, let's
from
do
some
it.
people.
I'm
All right.
down.
Well,
Hundred
Chris,
percent.
great talking to you, buddy. Love talking about birds.
Yeah, you too,
And
Jay.
yeah,
Appreciate you.
yeah, we'll do this soon. And I'll hopefully this video worked and we can get it uploaded. And just hang around for 1 second here. I'll turn it off and then we'll call it a night here.